When I was a kid, me and my best friend Bob Weston, we saw this movie on television. It was called Trilogy of Terror. And we saw it when we were, kids at home. But when we got to school the next day, we just couldn't stop talking to each other about it. We were really jazzed. It was pretty cool. Well, flash forward to the 1980s when video hit the scene. I was working at a video store and came across Trilogy of Terror. They released it on video. So I immediately called my best friend Bob and said, look, I got Trilogy of Terror on video, and brought it home that night, and he came over to my house and we watched it and we had a ball. And now flash forward from there to the summer of 2007. I was messing around on eBay, just killing some time, and I came across a listing for this warrior doll, the Zulu warrior doll that they had used in Trilogy of Terror. Well, this company was manufacturing the same doll and you could buy it. And it just immediately, I just clicked on the buy it now option and bought it. And from then on I just started thinking this would be great to do a little parody or a spoof of this movie, or to do a little episode with this Trilogy of Terror thing for my friend Bob and put it on a disc for Halloween for him. And that's how this whole thing started. By the time the doll came in the mail, I had already wrote the script out and had done a series of storyboards for some of the more complex shots. And I was excited at first when I pulled the doll out of the box, and then I realized that it was extremely fragile and it had real limited movement with arms and legs and head movement. In fact, the jaw didn't move at all. And then I went, oh my God, I'm going to have to make 2 or 3 more dolls for each of these different gags. And this short little project began to turn into this immense thing, and it nearly just scrubbed the whole thing, because I literally set it away for a week and just said, this isn't going to happen. It's too ridiculous. It's getting too big. And then one weekend while I was out, I stopped by the video store, and there on the horror rack was Trilogy of Terror. So I rented it, took it home, and I was surprised to discover how little of the doll is in that episode. And I watched it again and again, and I realized I could do a lot of the gags that they had in that episode with that doll and go beyond that. It was just going to take some maneuvering and was going to take some planning, but that's exactly what happened. The special effects. There was a lot of gags in this piece. Some were simple, some were more complex, and all of them involved experimentation to try to see what would work and try to pull it off. Everything else was done firsthand, and done simply because I wanted to pay tribute to the original film, and they didn't have an enormous budget for special effects, and they were really, a lot of their stuff in that film is done basically with tape and rubber bands, and it worked fine. And that's exactly what I wanted to do with this, and to keep an element of it alive, and to again at the same time to pay tribute to the original film, which I still get a kick out of all these years later. The sound I take it you're talking about the sound effects and the sound structure. I went back to the film and watched the film again, and to figure out how they did the voice, and I was stunned. Just by doing some experimentation, I found out exactly what they did, and I applied the same thing and did my own voice to it. This is in a sense what they did. They took Foley sound of a guy's voice just garbling like this, and they just sped it up. So depending on the peak, you knew what the voice was going to do. You increase the voice pitch, so when it sped up, it just went crazy. And that's exactly what I did with the sound effect of the doll's voice here. It's my voice throughout the whole project, beginning to end. There were other sound effects that I added. The sounds of the knife punching through flesh, of stabs, of the blood squirting, and then more subtle effects, footsteps, and then this might be funny. The doll's footsteps are really just two small flashlights as I threaded them across the floor to get the sound effect of the doll's feet. The cinematography. How's it going? Since this was a one-man shoot, I really didn't have any choice but to keep it extremely simple and basic. I knew that there was two things that I wanted to do. One, I kind of wanted to keep the camera moving, even no matter how subtly, but I wanted there to constantly be movement. I didn't really want to do any static lockdown shots for any long period of time. And secondly, the theme that I had for this piece that I tried to stick through, and it becomes more apparent in part one, and in part two, and in part three it gets more focused, is the concept of isolation. Now we see in part one, as he drives up to his home, how remote from the city it is. Even though it's surrounded by houses, it's remote to get there. And the idea was, like, if he needs help, it's a long way from him to get there. Once he gets inside his house, then it starts to close in more to where he's really confined into the bathroom in part two, and even more remotely so, till you get to the culmination in part three. So that's what my theme was, and that's what the cinematography was. I knew I was going to try to age the look of the film once I was finished, so I tried to make the colors pretty vivid, so that when I brought them down, it would work a little better. And I tried to stay away from really reds, any real bright colors. I wanted to stay beige, browns, oranges, ambers, those kind of colors. So that's really what my palette was that I was looking for. Well, I wasn't my first choice for an actor for this piece, but I could call on my services 24/7. And again, since I was primarily shooting on weekends or whenever time allowed me to shoot, I was available. And I wasn't going to have that unless I relied on myself. So that's how that came about. Again, when I say this is a one-man show, I'm not joking. The only person I could rely on from time to time, 90% of the time, was a friend, Patrick Lee, who I discussed shots with, Alex, my producer. I've talked to him about different things. He helped me but when it came down to rolling and rock and rolling and shooting the footage, it was 99% of that is me setting up the camera and rolling it, and then trying to get all the special effects to work while I'm doing the one-man show on there as well. And then there were times I was able to recruit my daughter in. She's very reluctant about it. Thinks it's nerdy, but it was fun. It was bringing her into it, so she helped me do some shots too, with the knife under the door, like I said, with the camera chasing after the guy and stuff like that. But everything else, it was just one-man show, guerrilla shooting, go in and get it, the footage, get it out, and get it on the editing bed as soon as I could, so I could work on it. And if it didn't work well, I went back and reshot it. And I had my share of setbacks and delays on this project, I'll tell you, more than anything else I've ever done in my life. Because it wasn't just one thing that happened, it'd be two or three things that compounded it. And at several points, it just made it look like I was never going to get this thing done. I was never going to get around to being able to complete it. The first most disastrous thing occurred was this location where I'd shot a lot of footage for part one and for part three, with the wife driving up. I didn't have everything, but I had about 80% of it shot, and there were wildfires that broke out, and it burnt everything. I mean, it decimated everything. In fact, one house that I was looking at, and I was shooting footage that would double as the protagonist's house, it fell a victim to the fire, and it just burnt to the ground. So here I am. I have to reshoot all this footage. I'd shot about 70% of the footage that I needed of the exterior, and included, the protagonist's house, and then some shots for the end. And I had to throw it all away because I didn't have everything I needed. I was about 30% short. So that sent me on a hunt to try to find another location, something that was suitable. And I was also trying to find something to where I wouldn't have to scrap everything that I'd shot. That I'd be able to salvage some of the wide master shots. But that set me back for about 9 months, because there wasn't a green blade of grass for miles around. And this was the only area that was close to me that had these communities in it that was wedged into this rock formations, which I really wanted to utilize. So I was stuck, and it bumped me for about a year. Things kind of got delayed for me a little more along the lines of that. That's one of the reasons it took so long to film this, because in the middle of this economic meltdown, I became a victim of it too, and I had to find out, I had to work another job. So I was working 2 jobs, and then sometimes 3 jobs, and it obviously crunched the weekends and took them away from me at periods of time. And then I'm not a single guy. I'm married, I got a family, so I got to make time for my family too. So all of these things composed in on it and pressured in on it. The film cost about $220 or $230, and the biggest expense on the project was the doll, which cost like $65, including shipping. And the rest was spent on videotape and expendables like the blood, the bandages, the knife, and things of that order. The software and things were stuff I already had, and camera and stuff, so the real expense was just videotape. That was the biggest item outside of the doll.